You had a bizarre, I don't know if bizarre is the right word, but a situation happen.
I had a terrible situation
now,
happen. It was horrible.
And we have talked about this when it happened, and it was quite an emotional thing, and you thought we should wait before were ready to talk about it, and you thought today you would be ready to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we actually recorded a podcast that evening, and I think we talked about it briefly. You said, do you want to do it now? And I was like, I can't. It's not going to happen. It's too emotional. And, enough time has passed now that I can sort of discuss it without the same level of emotion I would have felt that day, because it had happened, I think, the day before, didn't it? Something like that. Anyway.
Well, we talked the day it happened.
Oh, okay.
But we weren't recording that day. I think we were recording like a couple days after.
Right.
But we did talk the day this happened.
Yep.
And then we had a recording very soon thereafter, of which you had said it's just too fresh.
It was. Okay. And so the event was, well, let me set it up. So I think we have spoken, or I mentioned that I had started a new job. I had left the company that I was at before and went to this new company, and my office actually looks down over I don't know if this is entirely true, but I'm pretty sure it's true. It's one of the busiest, if not the busiest street in Canada. Does that sound right? Yonge Street?
I think Yonge Street, that'd be fair to say.
I know it's the longest street in Canada. It may in fact be one of the longest streets in the world, named Street, not Avenue or Boulevard or whatever. But anyway, so my office looks down into downtown Toronto and right into one of, if not the busiest streets in Canada. And there's a lot of foot traffic. There's a lot of car traffic, and it's downtown, so there's a lot of office buildings, and there are some apartment buildings as well. And right across from my office is a lower income, multi-story apartment building. And I don't know how many floors it is, but it's a tall building.
You're on what floor in your building?
Okay, so I'm on the third floor. And from my office, I'm working away. And so this is how the story unfolds. I'm working away at my office, typing away on my computer, taking phone calls, whatever. And I can hear a commotion out behind me on the street. And I hear people saying like, oh, watch out, watch out for the glass. And I mean, there's so much going on that street that's not an odd question. Like, that's not an odd statement. You hear so much going on so that you learn to dismiss 95% of the noise that you can hear out on the street.
Becomes almost like background to you, or white noise. Or
yeah, but you'll hear so there's a constant din, right? But you'll hear the little uproars, right? And you'll be like, oh, is that something I need to pay attention to? Or is it just like nothing, right? Anyway, so that, you hear people yelling and you're like, oh, watch out for the glass. And I'm thinking, oh, there's something going out on the street. So next thing I know, I hear down the hall, I hear a few people going, oh my God, something's going on. And we have like a life safety and security manager for a few of the buildings that we look after. So he goes running down the hall, and I hear, there's a lot of commotion. Everybody basically leaves their offices and goes to watch what's happening. And what was happening was there was a man 15 stories up smashing the glass out of his window. Now, this is an apartment building that doesn't have a balcony. Okay, so the only way is like to open the window to get fresh air, or if you wanted to, smash the glass, right? So this guy smashed the glass out of his window, and he wasn't getting fresh air. His sole purpose was that he was, and we didn't know this immediately, he was looking to end his life. And so, of course, we see like he doesn't. Okay, so first he smashes all the glass and it falls to the street, and people are freaking out. And then we see this hand like cleaning the glass from around the frame. And then a foot comes out the window and then goes back in. And then, I mean, he's trying to figure out how he wants to sit on the edge of this glass or out of the frame of this window. And this took place very, very quickly. And I'm going to say this now because this man's sole intention was to commit suicide. So I'm watching this along with other people in my office, and we're literally 40 feet away. Whatever the width of a street is, okay, we're that far away from this individual. And we're watching this happen. He's clearing the glass. He's trying to get his positioning so that he can jump out. And within about, I don't know, less than 15 minutes, he was out the window and on the ground. And it was probably one of the most horrifying experiences I've ever witnessed in my life. So usually when you think about it, you think a lot of people, and I've seen this too, like where, you know, you hear a story of somebody who wanted to commit suicide and they didn't know they wanted to commit suicide. They'll be on a ledge for an hour and, you know, they'll send the police in and the police will talk them off the ledge. And then at the end, everybody claps. That's not what happened with this guy. He was smashed the window and out and on the ground before anybody could really do anything. We called 911. 911 was busy because I'm sure we weren't the only ones calling. There were hundreds of people probably on the street, and they were shouting up to this guy, "Don't do it, don't do it," you know, like, and, you know, of course, when he did, there was that, like a din of like, you know, like everybody was like, "Oh my gosh," and then people were crying, you know, people were turning their heads away from the scene. Women were, you know, burying their faces in their husband's or their boyfriend's chest. It was horrific. The police were already there because I guess we weren't the only ones calling 911, and so they were already running up the street. Now, I've since learned more, so this is all going to come out as I tell the story, but the police were already running up the street, and of course, immediately, you know, they started getting people away, like move away. There's a dead body on the street. It was horrible to watch this guy come out the window and land on the concrete. Thank God there was like a window at a building separating me from the actual sound. Again, I could tell you that I heard the sound of the body hitting the cement, and it's possible I did, but because there was the, you know, that buffer of the building and window between me, I could easily say that I kind of manufactured that sound in my brain, but I don't,
right.
You know, even still, it was horrible. So the police arrive on the scene. You know, they're getting everybody away. They tape off as quickly as they can. You know, a number of police cruisers arrive. You know, an ambulance arrives, and they get out of the ambulance and they throw like one of those orange, you know, blankets over top of this guy. They grab a couple of sandbags from a nearby, you know, construction sign, and they just kind of place it on the thing. One shoe had fallen off this guy's foot. His hat had come off his head. It had blown into the middle of Yonge Street. They pinned both of those down with sandbags as well, so they wouldn't blow around. It was kind of a windy day. And then everything just stopped for hours. Like, they had police come in. They did an investigation, I guess. I mean, you can't really see anything that's going on in the building. That guy sat, first of all, sorry, just to go back, when they covered him in a blanket, it didn't happen immediately. His body was probably exposed for a good, I want to say 15 minutes, which, wow, if I go back in my head, I mean, that seemed like an eternity. Okay. And our boardroom looks right onto, it would be directly perpendicular with, like, if you drew a straight line from his body right into the middle of our boardroom, that would be exactly like perfect.
Right.
So we all stood in there, and I don't think any of us really said anything for, I want to say 2 to 3 minutes, which again, you think to yourself, 2 minutes, that's such a short period of time. But in a moment like that, it's so long. And then finally,
I'm sure.
I think Mitch, who's our he was the guy that called in the 911. He said, I can't believe we just watched that. And, we just all kind of turned to each other and went, I don't even know what to say right now. Like, you don't know what to say in a moment like that. We had girls crying in our office. One in particular that was the one that actually saw it from the very beginning. She was the first one because she was the one that called Mitch. And so they cover the body. The blood from this man is kind of soaking through. And I realize this, I'm speaking of that. I hope this isn't offensive to anybody. It's a bit, I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I mean, I witnessed this whole thing and it was disgusting. It was horrible. And I hope no one ever has to see this in their lifetime. They covered the body. The blood was bleeding through the blanket. And then the police come, they do their investigation, but the body stayed there for hours, like hours. So this happened at around 11:30, I want to say, in the morning. And I mean, at some point I got to about 2:30 in the afternoon and I went, I can't even work. Like I talked to my boss and a couple of them just said, look, you go home. Like you're not, it took me I had to write an email to somebody. It took me 10 minutes to write the email because I couldn't even figure out what to say. And it wasn't even a long email.
An email not about this topic.
No. It was like a work email.
For work.
You try to sort of go back to work and you can't. Like that's the only thing I could think of. And so I'm sitting there trying to write coherent sentences, and you can't think of anything else. So I closed my laptop and I went into my boss's office and I just said, I got to go home. And they were like, you know what? Completely understand. Take the day. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, the last person to leave the office that day was a girl who didn't see any of it. She wasn't, she was kind of aware of what was going on, but she was wrapped up in some other stuff and she never really came to join everybody when all the, stuff was going on. And, so she didn't see any of it. So she wasn't affected by any of it. By the time she had joined everybody, it was, a lump under a blanket that she never saw at all. So,
but that could still be fairly traumatic.
It could be, but the weird part about it is it's not the same. It's not the same when you witness, like a human body launch itself out of a window on purpose and then hit the ground. It's not the same. When you come across something, it's like, oh, there's a person under that blanket. Well, there's like a picture in your head that does not look anything like the actual picture, right? So anyway, so she left at about 6 p.m. and the body was still there. So when I had gone home, I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is it's horrible. I didn't know how to process this whole thing. I thought, this is terrible. How could a human being be so sad and depressed that's how they want to end their life, toss themselves off of a 15-story building onto concrete? And I had a hard time processing this. But she had mentioned when she left that the SIU had shown up. And they obviously had to do an investigation. And as it turns out, and we found this out afterward, the guy was a very bad man. He was a known drug dealer. The police were actually there to arrest him, and he was having none of it. And decided that the best way out was for him to, end things. So while that doesn't make it any better, in the sense that, a human being lost their life and chose to do that, it helps me process the fact that this wasn't a sad, lonely human being. This was a choice that, this was a bad choice. from a human being who had already made a series of really bad choices. So, and also, by the way, apparently they were as high as a kite. And this is according to sources within the building that knew the man. So, again, probably take it with a grain of salt, but in that, I'm sure there's a little bit of truth. And
well, and not to interrupt, but I mean, he still could be sad and lonely, and
sure,
on drugs.
All of that could have been a contributor to him picking that profession. But
I know what you mean, because when we first heard this, or when I first heard you tell me about this, the image probably most people would defer to is that here's somebody who's having mental issues. Maybe he's got serious debt problems. Maybe he's been informed of something very, very tragic that's happened to him. He's been diagnosed with something, or something very traumatic has happened.
Yeah, or he could have been anything. Broke up with a girlfriend. Lost his job, immigrant who couldn't find enough work, was heavily in debt. And the only reason I say immigrant was because the man did look Asian. But, it was a low income housing building. It was absolutely, there were so many emotions that went through me that day. Like, it was heartbreaking, and it was, horrible. Frightening, a little bit angry. The anger kind of hit, not angry. Angry's not right. I was a little bit upset, at the fact that, days later I was still thinking about this, and I'm thinking to myself, and here's the weird thing, not to get too graphic, but, about 5 days later, when some of the emotion of this had waned. It kind of subsided a little bit. I thought to myself, well, I had, my wife and I are very close, and we snuggle a fair bit. And 5 days later, after some of the weirdness had kind of disappeared, we thought, well, let's have sex, right? So, but and as I'm having sex with my wife, I'm still thinking about this guy, and there was a bit of no, I'm sorry, but you don't get to ruin my life because you ruined yours. And so there was a little bit of anger there because of that, which again, of course, then I immediately felt guilty about, because here was a guy who ended his life. So there were so many weird emotions that hit me, and some of them would hit me all at once. Sometimes it would hit me one at a time. If you've never been through this experience, I don't wish it on anybody, but is the strangest and most probably horrific experience that I've gone through.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I mean,
it's impossible to unpack in one little thing.
Yeah. I mean, but there are situations that happen that are tragic, car accidents, various traumatic things that can affect people and have them walk away with emotions about that for days. And so when you hear you're describing witnessing something like this, I think the underlying factor is the suicide aspect of this, that it would definitely make people think, well, okay, so you had said, what gives this guy the right to, be involved in my emotions 6-7 days after he's done this? You had no choice in the matter. The fact it was a suicide almost makes a difference. But if it had been a car accident and a guy getting hit by a car and you seeing a similar amount of grisliness, do you think 5 days later you would have a different feeling about the whole situation, or would you still be almost upset in a sense that this has gone into your life and will continue to be into it for a certain amount of time, probably never forget it? Would it be different if it was an accident?
Yes. I think it would be different. Yeah, for sure. So here's the difference for me. The difference is, if I had seen a horrific accident, that's exactly what it was, an accident. Tragic, sad, maybe that would have been, that's someone's son or daughter, that's someone's father maybe, or mother, depending on who it was. Like, it's an accident and it's tragic and it would stick with me and I would still think about it and I would be sad for that person. And I'd be sad for their families. And I would probably be very grateful for my own families. There would be like some bit of, I think when a tragic event like that happens, you kind of think to yourself, wow, you go home that night and you hug your kids a little tighter. You hug your wife a little tighter and you say, yeah. God, I'm so thankful for you, right? That you're here, that we have this, that we're together. And I think that's natural. But the fact that this guy okay, so here's the thing. And I know a lot of people have said this before me, and I don't want to offend anybody, but when you commit suicide, you're choosing a permanent problem to a temporary, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And it's never just about you. You affect way more people. There were literally, I don't know because I don't have a total. I didn't sit there and count all the people. There were well over 100 people that witnessed this. So I know that I'm not the only person that went home that night and have, went home that week and struggled with the same things I struggled with. So that person, he gets to shut the lights on everything, and then the 150 of us have to go home and deal with this, not just now, but for the rest of our lives, right?
Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
And, you will be one individual who will be affected a certain way, and there will be people who will be less affected, and there will be people who will be more affected even than you have been by this, what has happened. Yeah. So this is a life thing. Obviously, this is life and death, and it's an extremely sensitive discussion because there will be people listening to this that are assuming that we are making a number of assumptions, even though you've had some information that suggests it was a person of wasn't exactly a law-abiding person. It was a person that did this act, and as we said, I mean, I think both of us, when you first told me, we each thought it was somebody who was down in the dumps and had probably, who knows what his situation was. Like I was saying, he was maybe in massive amounts of debt, couldn't figure out a way to get around it. And I think what I want to say to the audience here is that occasionally we're going to talk about topics that we may sound like we're making all these assumptions, and by no means do we ever mean to offend. These are just what's on our mind, and I think we're always open for other people's perspectives on this.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just trying to say that there will be people who may think, well, just because he was not a law-abiding citizen and that he was on drugs and that he had a criminal past and all these things, it could mean that we have a right to be angrier. And I think it's okay for us to say that, even though we might be wrong about it.
Right.
But we might be right about it.
Yeah, no, and I'm just, I'm simply saying how I felt at the moment.
Yes.
How I feel now. I mean, I'm basing everything on a small amount of information, and the reality is the police won't give you everything anyway.
No.
So, you have to learn to process it on your own. I'm simply talking stream of thought and being honest about how I felt. And I think we've talked about this in previous things where we've talked about a topic that's somewhat sensitive. I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, so I don't have all the information about everything. So if I make a comment,
and you're human as well.
I make a comment, it's completely out of ignorance. But anyway, sorry, just to go back to the whole thing, based on the little information that we've got, I think a lot of us have now come to the point where, we've been able to not put it behind us, but at least get to the point where we're able to move to the next phase of moving on, you know? I mean, every day we come into the office and the glass is still broken. There's a piece of plywood right there. We stare at it every day, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
The tree.
Have you gone down to that street level?
Okay,
and
so very interesting story about that. I had a meeting, so it happened on a Thursday. I had a meeting at my head office on a Monday, and it was a rainy day. And after that meeting, I actually chose, instead of taking the subway, I chose to walk from our head office, which is not that far away. It's only like a 15-minute walk up the street. And I wanted to walk on that side of the street underneath the window and walk across the spot that this gentleman lay. And the reason why was because when I was in the meeting at our head office, which is in a high-rise building, the only thing I could think about was, when I was looking out of the boardroom window, was all of the high-rise buildings that were there. The only thing I could see in my head, while this meeting is going on, by the way, all I could see in my head was people jumping out of windows, right?
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, this has completely taken over my brain. And again, there's that little bit of anger. Like, how come he gets to be done and I've got to deal with this now, this trauma, this level of violence that has happened? Like, we talked about this before when you said it's a violent act, right? It just wasn't committed against me in a violent sense. No one struck me in the face or punched me in the stomach or held a gun to my face. They jumped out of a window and I had to watch it, right? So I'm sitting there in this boardroom and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. This can't dominate me. And I'm very much like that. Like, I will face my fears. So maybe not right away, but eventually I will face my fears. And so when I walked in the rain. It was a cool, rainy day. And I forced myself to walk under that spot. And when I did, I walked right across where this guy's body lay. I turned around. I looked up at the building. And at that point, they had just freshly put in the plywood. It was a bit of a surreal experience, but I'm glad I did it because...
was it almost like making peace with it a little bit?
I don't think it made peace with it, but it was like that whole, like, if you fall off a horse, you got to get back on it kind of thing. So, in a way, it helped me kind of get through that next stage of processing everything, which, by the way, I still haven't done.
I'm sure.
But it was helpful, I thought.
It's hard to know what to say. I mean, I think we've both been saying as we've been talking here, but we should revisit, if you're comfortable with this, in another couple weeks and just see, where you're at.
Yeah, that would be fine. I don't want to. We probably should. We don't need to talk about it much more. I just thought it would be interesting to share. If anybody else has gone through that experience, we would definitely be interested in finding out how you dealt with it, what your experience was, and certainly to know that you're not alone. I know I wasn't alone because I watched it with 100 other people. So the only difference, and I would say, is that because it happened at my place of work, and because my place of work is a fairly large company, they immediately jumped into action and said, if anybody needs to talk to a counselor or a psychologist of any kind, it's there. Here it is.
That's good.
They actually had someone come by the very next day, and they made themselves available for most of the day in the boardroom. We could go in and we could talk with them one-on-one, and there would be people.
Did you?
I did. Yeah, absolutely. And there would be people on the street that wouldn't have that same opportunity. So
right.
I'm very fortunate in that way.
That's interesting because you're right. Because you happen to be in your place of work when this happened. You have access to professional services to help you cope through it. Uh-huh. But the guy that was just randomly in the area at the time walking by may not have that. And it's interesting because it's a strange thing that you have access to professional services because it happened at a company that provides it.
Yeah.
Whereas other people saw it from their house or their own apartments. Some people saw it from street level. I mean, when you mentioned inviting people to talk about it, I think we would invite people to talk about it from the various perspectives of a scenario like this, whether it's as an observer that doesn't know the person, an observer that does know the person, as a person who is connected to someone who's done something like this. Any perspectives we would be open to hearing from.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's end that. Let's end that there. We'll come back and revisit this another time.
Okay. Well, we were also going to talk about some news that I had read recently, last week, about Netflix.
Yes. Gear shift.
Big gear shift. Yeah.
It's okay. It's good.
The transition sound. We'll have to figure it out.
There's no transition for this. It's change gears. End of story. That's it.
Yeah. So the article I had read was that Netflix was in. There's a couple of articles that I pulled here that the headlines sort of speak for it. So, so the one from the Street. This is the website, The Street. Netflix investors will struggle more than ever to make a return now. And the second one was Netflix's strategy is unsustainable when competition starts flexing their experienced muscles.
Yeah, and I think I read one or both of those.
The one I sent you was not either of those. It was one of these almost clickbaity type headlines.
Yes, that's the one I read then.
That said Netflix must do this in 180 days or it will go under.
One. Yes. I hate clickbait, but you're right. That article summed everything up.
And I clicked on it, and basically the overall or the overarching theme was that Disney is launching its own streaming service in 180 days, I believe it is, and is going to create some serious competition for other streaming services, namely Netflix. Number one, Netflix will lose all Disney-related content as a result of this. Yep. So when you think about the franchises that are involved in that, like the Avengers and a lot of these superhero shows or movies, Star Wars is owned by Disney. That Disney, once they launch their own streaming service, is actually going to completely pull from Netflix all of its content. Now, the articles that I've been reading here about Netflix is that they've spent an inordinate amount of money producing their own content. They believe content is king. For sure. Content is king. And I remember talking to our mutual friend Mike about this, about how much content is being produced by Netflix. That every time you turn,
so much.
You see another Netflix original, as they say, whether it's reality TV, like cooking shows or various documentaries, to things like Narcos, to
such a good series.
many original series. A lot of these, like Daredevil and some of the superhero Marvel, I think they got really on board on the Marvel.
Oh no, but they
side
didn't do anything with Marvel. They just made that content available. That's Disney. Isn't it?
No, I think they produced it. No. I think they produced all of the franchise of the. Well, yeah, is that the Avengers?
Marvel is all Disney. Yep.
Okay,
so that's the crazy thing. I mean, they own some serious stuff.
Yes.
Disney does.
So the main issue here is that last year Netflix spent $10 billion on producing content, which is an insane amount of money. And now matched up against revenues of whatever it is may not sound so strange. But one thing that I've read in a couple of articles is that the debt ratio or the debt that they are taking on is not sustainable simply by raising their prices. So Netflix recently announced they were raising their price by, I think, 18%.
Right.
So at one time, something that was, gosh, I mean, when Netflix first came out, wasn't it like $6.99 or $7.99?
Yeah.
A very small amount of money to access a catalog of, I would argue back then, a decent amount of content. So clearly Netflix's strategy has been to build content and give you, increase their value proposition, so to speak, to make it so that when they did decide one day to bump their prices up by 20%, that you would say, oh, well, 20%. So it goes from $8 a month to $12 or whatever it works out to be. I think they've done a couple of incremental increases over the last.
They have.
So if you're on like the full on plan, I want to say a top end Netflix account, like with family share where you've got multiple people that can dial into it or use it, I think is now up to about $15 a month.
It is.
If I'm
that's what we pay. $14.99, I think.
I think the question here is, and you made a good point when we chatted about this before, was that, okay, so what's the future of a Netflix? Because how can they continue to take on? I mean, they're borrowing a lot of money. They're borrowing a massive amount of money to sustain the ability to create the content.
Hold on, just one sec. I'm going to let you finish this because finish describing what was said in the article, and I will tell you the problems that I had with it. Because there were things that I immediately said to you.
Well, I've got to find the article. I'll edit this out.
Okay.
I'm a little bit flat-footed here because the specific article I sent you, which I don't know if I still have it in our, because it's something we need to. So just give me a second.
Okay.
Here.
So while you're looking for that, I want to know why they chose 180 days. Isn't that 6 months? Just say 6 months.
They chose it because I believe that's when Disney is going to launch their service.
Sure, but just say 6 months. Right?
Yeah, I guess 180 days has a more. I think it has a much faster. When you say 6 months or you say 180 days, I think that it just sounds more urgent.
Really?
Maybe.
I see. 6 months to me sounds like it's not that far away. 180 days sounds like it could be like to me it's futuristic. It could be 3 years from now. I think
people would argue that. I think it would that you could argue that some people. I think it depends on the people's perspective.
I think so too.
I thought I had saved this damn thing.
Okay, so the gist of the article was that Disney is going to launch their new series. Netflix has been spending inordinate amounts of money on producing new and original content, and the amount of money that they've been spending is not being recouped by the raises in prices that they've passed on to their customers. And so therefore, because of the debt that they have, they're in trouble, and they may not be able to sustain themselves after Disney opens their new channel and yanks all their content off of Netflix. So this person's opinion was that in reality, why are we even supporting Netflix anymore? Let's just wait for Disney, and then we'll all jump to Disney and be one happy family. That was essentially the person. And so the couple things that I said to you was, okay, first of all, where's this person getting their data? All right. And then secondly, was this written by a Disney employee?
Right.
Because the way the article was written was that it was very critical of Netflix, and tried to sort of put that sway, that bias, like, let's all jump on the Disney bandwagon and leave Netflix behind. And I not that I'm like, when I don't work for Netflix, I could care less. I like Netflix. It's there. But the reality is, I'm like any other consumer. I will go where the content is. And so if that happens to be Disney or Crave or whatever it is, wherever the best content is, I'm probably going to jump. So loyalty is not really, the consumer isn't loyal. They're loyal to where the content is, I think. The general, like the vast majority of the consumer. So, but again, like the way the article was written was so... Okay, you found it? Okay, good.
I did, yeah, sorry. So, the first of all, the title. Netflix has 175 days left to pull off a miracle, or it's all over.
Yeah, it's all over. So the title alone is so dramatic, right? This just opens a whole other can of worms about journalism today. I hate journalism today. But again, go on.
Okay, so they talk about people cutting the cord, just
right, giving up
the
cable
fact that
and just going with online streaming services. Yeah.
So they say that combined, America's 5 biggest cable companies are worth over $750 billion. And most investors assume Netflix will claim the bulk of profits that cable leaves behind. And according to this, so far they've been right. Have you seen Netflix's stock price? It's rocketed 8,300% since 2009, leaving Amazon in the dust.
Jeez.
According to him, he says, please don't let this past, or not please, but don't let this past success fool you, because Netflix is not the future of TV. And that's his big statement. So he said the only thing that matters as far as he's concerned is Netflix has changed how we watch TV, but it didn't really change what we watch. Netflix has achieved its incredible growth by taking distribution away from cable companies. Instead of watching The Office on cable, people now watch The Office on Netflix. But this edge is not sustainable. In a world where you can watch practically anything whenever you want, dominance in distribution is very fragile.
Sorry, just to interrupt 1 second. Could you imagine if somebody had come to you in 2008 or 2009 and said, "Hey, Clark, I got this tip. This company, Netflix, we think it's really going to explode. Why don't you put some money in and ride the wave?" And, you probably would be like, I don't know, man. And then imagine if that person just convinced you to just say, like, throw in like $1,000. Times that by 8,300%. Are you kidding me? You'd never have to work.
This Netflix... This debate has been going on for a while, though, when I think 5 years ago, a lot of people were predicting that Netflix would have issues eventually. And I think some of it was centered around this type of discussion, that there was some talk that investing in Netflix could have it may be a short tail to it, that they are going to run into problems at some point, i.e. now, and maybe this is what they were alluding to. But clearly, yes, since 2009, there are many people who probably were thinking, should I invest, should I not invest? And clearly, since 2009, having invested would be would have been an extremely beneficial thing. So now, I want to just throw out a few statistics here. So Netflix knows content is king. The company spent $12 billion developing original shows last year. It released 88% more original programming in 2019 than it did in the previous year. And spending on original shows and movies is expected to hit $15 billion this year.
Okay.
It now invests more in content than any other American TV network. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Netflix is borrowing huge sums of debt. It currently owes creditors $10.4 billion, which is 60% more than it owed this time last year.
Okay,
but the problem is that let me just finish this statement here. The problem is that no matter how much Netflix spends, it has no chance to catch up with its biggest rival. And that's where we think, the Disney writer or influencer got involved and wrote this article.
Yes, exactly.
You were going to say something, though?
I can't remember now.
So let me just summarize.
Sorry, go
this
back
here.
Go back and say what you just said, because it was something in there. I can't remember what it was.
Sure. Yeah, so Netflix is borrowing huge sums of debt.
Oh, I know what it was.
Currently
Okay,
owes
that's
creditors.
it. Right. So where does that come from? Like, I mean, I'm sorry. If I own a company and I'm borrowing huge sums of money, while it might be known that I'm borrowing huge sums of money, it's probably not known the exact number. Like, the bank doesn't verify that information for you.
If it's a public company, it would certainly be. It would all be in the financial statements and available
that's
to the public.
true. That's right. I'm sorry. You're right. That was a dumb statement.
Hence the stock.
Right.
Want me to edit that out?
Hardy
or-
har. Okay, whatever. It's late here, okay?
That's
yeah.
okay.
Okay, that was dumb. Can we edit that out? No, leave it in. That'll just prove my stupidity, which I mentioned to you before, right? Like, I am not the smartest guy in the room. So anyway.
Yeah, I think we will be forgiven.
Yeah.
So Netflix, so it's 175 days. Disney is set to launch its own streaming service called Disney Plus. It's going to charge $6.99 per month, around $6 cheaper than Netflix, and it's pulling all its content off of Netflix.
And so it's not going to broadcast any stuff that's not Disney. So it'll be all Disney all the time. So you're going to get all the Marvel, all the Star Wars, all their cartoons, all their fluffy family things. What else does Disney do? Pirates of the Caribbean. It's got lots.
National Geographic. Modern Family.
National Geographic.
The Simpsons.
Modern Family. Interesting.
Pixar.
Oh, yeah. Well, Pixar. They bought Pixar years ago.
Yeah. So Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, ESPN is owned by Disney. Not that sports are being broadcast on streaming services like Netflix per se. I mean, you can get like the MLB app or the NHL app or the Premier League app and stream content like I do here in Japan. I stream the MLB and the NHL. So ESPN, there are some documentaries on Netflix that are ESPN, like those 30-minute documentaries on various sports figures.
Yeah.
But if you look at the list of the 5 highest earning movies of 2018, it was Avengers of Infinity War,
Disney,
Infinity War, Black Panther,
Disney,
Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom,
not Disney.
Correct. All except Jurassic World are Disney productions, and the 4th one was Incredibles 2. So out of that top Disney 4, Pixar. Only Jurassic. Yeah, out of those top 4, only Jurassic World was not a Disney channel. So what they're saying here is that they expect that Disney's going to put something like Avengers Endgame on its platform the same day it opens in theaters.
Right.
After a few weeks, it's no longer in theaters. You can't buy it. You can't rent it. The only way to watch it is to subscribe to Disney's streaming service, Disney Plus.
Right. Yeah.
So if your children, your grandchildren want to watch Toy Story 4, Frozen 2, the only place they're going to see it is on Disney Plus.
Right. Yeah. No, and you know what? You cannot you can't say that Disney is not smart. They are brilliant. So, hey, I mean,
I like Netflix a lot. I mean, it's something that I think it's totally changed the way we watch TV, and to me, it did enable us to cord cut. Like, we were a cord cutter maybe 8 years ago.
We
got out
far
of
behind you, yeah. Like maybe 4
a lot of
years
people
ago.
have looked and have said goodbye to cable because of Netflix, and then supplemented it with things like the MLB network and like the NHL network, like I have. Because I remember talking to a colleague at work about this. He said that he would be fully willing to quit cable, but the biggest thing the cable companies had over him was the ability to watch sports. But now that you can get like the Premier League app or the NHL, NBA, all these different apps, pretty much any major sport, I kind of did the math on this. The streaming services like the NHL app or the MLB app run anywhere from $100 a year to a couple $100 a year or a season. So when you figure some people are spending upwards of $200 on cable a month, which is not...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Granted, it is often combined with an internet cable package, phone sometimes. But I think at minimum you're spending $100 on the cable side of it. And if you multiply that by 12 and make that $1,200 a year just on cable, then you take something like Netflix, which is $15 a month. So $150, do the math. Now I'm showing my, so let's say
You're not
$200 a
either.
year. $200 a year, plus buy a few of these sport things like MLB, NHL. There's
You're
a couple
saving
$100.
money. There's no question.
So for about $500,
Yeah.
I'm getting a whole year worth of everything I could possibly want or need
No question. You're saving money.
instead of
There's-
$1,200.
Yeah, which is what's kind of really made the cable companies a little bit upset about it, because they want people to subscribe to their cable content. And unfortunately, cable content has just become crap. So anyway, that's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't like it. And that's why we cut the cord a few years ago. So, yeah. And I don't think we've looked back.
We haven't. We haven't looked back at all. And the only thing that, we don't really watch news. So, we don't have CNN. I think the biggest thing is we don't have the TV constantly running in the background
yes.
like we might have before.
Yeah.
There's no more channel surfing, flicking around. That's another thing that I really like, that we don't channel surf and mindlessly browse. Although you could do that on Netflix.
I do that all the time on Netflix, though. I'll browse for an hour looking for something else to watch.
So I guess that's the new channel surfing, but I still feel it's better than the old days of clicking through
Yes,
at 8
you can
o'clock
at least
on
browse by genre.
Friday. Sure, it's a little better than just flipping through and the various. All you had was whatever was on TV at that time per the schedule that the cable companies made you follow.
Right. So,
all right, let's end it there.
Okay.
If you're okay with that.
No, that's good. The end.